Meg Toth, thank you so much for coming
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited.
to coming to virtual land. Is
Yeah,
it, I'm in the ethereal,
I know
something ghostly.
your spectral background. Having birds. It's not
And
the
because
same.
it's not quite working, so I get a little glow around me, but I think that actually works.
Yeah,
That
it's like you're disappearing into the ether.
So will you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? And
Sure, sure. So my name is Meg Toth. I teach at Manhattan College in the English department. Manhattan College is actually up in the Bronx. Some people don't realize that. It was in Manhattan back in the day and then moved up to the Bronx. So I teach in the English department and I teach primarily American literature and film. I direct the film studies minor. And the main reason why I'm here is because I work primarily on Edith Wharton. So I've published a lot of articles on Edith Wharton. I am an executive board member on the Edith Wharton Society. I co-directed Edith Wharton in New York with the lovely Jay Jesse. And I'm currently working on a book on Edith Wharton, which Kevin knows is on Edith Wharton's late fiction. So that is my story. And I have a very particular interest in adaptation studies because I do work on literature and on film. And I teach a whole course actually on adaptation studies and sort of the theory of adaptation and looking at particular texts. So I am thrilled to be here, so honored to be invited to a rehearsal, and I'm excited to talk.
I wish I could sign up for that class because maybe I need it before I started this project. Hopefully I can find out a little bit today.
Yeah.
How did you get interested in Edith Wharton? Like, what is it about her?
Yeah, it's funny, I knew you were gonna ask this question. I had to really think about, put my mind back, because I guess it's just been so long since I've been immersed in the world of Edith Wharton and writing about her and reading her and thinking about her. And I think that in high school, I might have had a copy of the Age of Innocence. I maybe tried to read it, or I might have even read it. But the first very concrete memory I have of her is in a graduate seminar at Tufts University. I took a course with Liz Ammons, who's one of the earliest scholars of Edith Wharton, wrote a groundbreaking book on her, Edith Wharton's Argument with America. This is before there were Edith Wharton scholars per se. But at any rate, I took this graduate seminar and we read The House of Mirth. And I have a very distinct memory of finishing the novel. I was in the Tufts library, downstairs in this carrel, and I was just sobbing. I was so moved by the fate of her main character, Lily.
At what point did you sob? What point did you sob?
Well, this is going to involve spoilers. Spoiler alert.
I haven't read The House of Mirth. Okay, if you haven't read The House of Mirth, here comes a spoiler alert. So you might want to put us on pause. All right, did you pause it? Okay. Spoiler alert. What was it that made you sob?
Just her death, Lily's death. I mean, I was getting increasingly agitated as the novel was moving forward. And I mean, this is something I love about Edith Wharton, just the way that she shows the truth of predicaments that her characters find themselves in, but particularly women. And as you're reading the novel, you're just seeing these doors closing, and this character becoming increasingly imprisoned and trapped in this world she occupies. And then you think, well, maybe, because at the same time, Edith Wharton's mobilizing all these sort of romance plot tropes. You think, well, maybe there's going to be this rescue at the end. No, she dies. So that was the sobbing, much sobbing. And that was it for me. I was hooked after that.
Really? I was shocked. I hadn't read that novel until after I started working on this project, and I was expecting something totally different. I was expecting something like A Room with a View.
Yeah.
It was shocking. It was shocking.
Yeah.
And I was desperate for her to somehow, what is his name? Who's the character who she flirts with continuously throughout the
Selden. Selden.
Lawrence Selden. I thought for sure it was going to work out.
I know. And when I teach the novel, my students think so too. And it's like, I always tell them, like, don't read anything about it. Just read the novel. It's so hard in the age of like Spark Notes. You know, they're so easy to find out the ending, but I'm like, try not to. And I think a lot of them are genuinely shocked. Again, it goes back to what I was saying, you know, it's a devastating novel, it's a social critique, but at the same time, Wharton's using these romance tropes. So you do think, okay, probably it's going to be like the happy ending. That's actually how I learned the term meet cute, by the way. I did not know that term until I taught that novel one semester, and my students were like, yeah, this is a classic meet cute. And I was like, you have to tell me what this is. And so yeah.
And how did they describe a meet cute?
They said it's like the quirky first meeting of the two love interests. So I guess they think like Lily and Selden meeting at the train station.
Oh, is meet cute?
I don't know if it's exactly a meet cute, but I could see it. I buy it.
So you were hooked after the House of Mirth, but then was there more that came after that? Like, were there things that surprised you about Edith Wharton or surprised you about her writing that kept you? Because then you turned into an Edith Wharton scholar, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm trying to remember. I think I wrote my dissertation. I had a chapter on the House of Mirth. And then I was invited to write an essay about Edith Wharton and race for this book called Edith Wharton in Context, and sort of different scholars contributing chapters about like different aspects of Wharton's writing. And so at that point, I sat down and pretty much read everything. And I guess I was just surprised by, well, you know that the late stuff. I was so surprised by that, right? That she's writing in the 1920s and the 1930s until she passes away in 1937. And you know, she's older then, but she's keeping up with all these very relevant hot topics, right? Like she has her Jazz Age novel, The Glimpses of the Moon, in 1922. She's writing about, you know, women's liberation, about women's sexuality, about modernism. I mean, she's writing about all these things that I think people don't usually think about when they hear the name Edith Wharton. So I guess that was a surprise, and it made me want to continue working on her. You know, I think a lot of people, if people are watching and you don't know a lot about Edith Wharton, one thing you might know is Ethan Frome, right? I don't know about you, Kevin, but a lot of people are assigned Ethan Frome in high school, which is kind of a shame because they read Ethan Frome and then they're like, I am done with this lady. Like, this is depressing and dark. It is not a good novel for a 16-year-old. But I wish, instead they were reading The Glimpses of the Moon or The Children or Twilight Sleep, right? These novels that nobody really talks about.
I just started reading The Children. I'm in the second chapter. They're on the boat.
Yeah.
It's good. It's exciting.
Good for you.
I just read because I went through all the sort of the ones that I would think of. I read The House of Mirth, The Age of Innocence, The Custom of the Country. I did read Ethan Frome, and then I read Summer, which was a shocker.
Yeah.
And then I paused for a little bit, and then I just read A Sun at the Front.
Right, the war novel. Okay, good. So this is a good time for me to ask you,
okay,
why Edith Wharton for you? Because you read all this stuff that I think people usually read first, well, at least like something like The House of Mirth, after the ghost stories and after you got interested.
It's hard to answer succinctly. It was motivated by I wanted to do a project, and I needed it to be about something for it kind of to have a reason to come into being. Mm-hmm. I had experience devising theater with young people and devising theaters with community members. And when you do those types of projects, a big part of it is meeting the young people or meeting the community members and finding out what they want to make a performance about. So originally I was thinking, well, I'll get some actors and designers together and we'll do some workshops, and then I'll figure out based on, what their interest is, what we'll do. And I couldn't get that project. I couldn't get that project off the ground. And then I talked to some other artists and they were like, you know what, Kevin, if you could find something for it to be about and then tell people what it is you're working on, that'll attract some people. Mm-hmm. And then you'll start getting something going. And then I was like, well, what could it be? Like, what do I like? What do I want to do? And my thesis project, I got my MFA at Brooklyn College. My thesis project was a play called Neighborhood 3: Requisition of Doom that used video games and horror and technology to ask some questions about how is technology impacting our lives? What is technology doing to us? How is technology changing the already complicated relationship between teenagers and parents and teenagers to each other? And what happened was when we did the performance, when we had audiences that were largely Brooklyn College students, their reactions were so fantastic. There was audible gasps and it had comedy in it. So there was lots of laughing. And then at some point, kind of talking back to the stage, which was so great. And so I was thinking, there's not a lot of scary theater. I like scary. Maybe I could put together a project that's scary. How would I do that? And then I thought, there's a director named Mary Zimmerman, and she has a play called Metamorphoses, where she took a bunch of different myths and she strung them together into an evening. And I thought maybe I could do something like that with short stories. What short stories are there that are scary? And then I ended up on Project Gutenberg, looking through things that were in the public domain and reading stories from a long time ago. And some of them were great, but they were scary and not about anything. It was just for the purpose of being frightening, but there wasn't any content there. And I think Afterward, which is a story that Edith Wharton wrote, and one of the ones that we're doing, was in a collection of greatest short stories from 1910. And I went, oh, this is actually really interesting. This is Edith Wharton, really? I didn't think she wrote ghost stories. And then I read it and I knew there was parts of it that I didn't understand. I was like, oh, there's something's going on here. It feels like there's more about it. And this was 2019. And I went into JSTOR. And I started putting into JSTOR Edith Wharton ghost stories. And then all these articles came up and I was like, oh, wait a minute, something's going on here. And then there were great articles, one of them written by you, that was talking about all the different analysis of her work. And then I found out there were lots of other ghost stories. And so that was like the seed of the project. I was like, oh, these are different ghost stories, and she's purposefully using, and then I had to learn about what Gothic literature is and what are all the tropes in that and how she's kind of flipping them on their head, and that her audience at the time reading them would have probably understood that a little bit more than I did. I thought, oh, this is really great. And these stories are full of content. They're all about, social critiques and how does social norms confine us and what do we do about that? There was a lot in there. I mean, I think it's intrinsic to ghost stories generally that the past is going to intrude on the present, but it seems like Edith Wharton is obsessed with the past coming back, isn't she? Like generally?
Yeah. I mean, we talked about this a bit with Afterward, right? This idea, like, you can't outrun your past. Your past is going to catch up with you. And yeah, I mean, I guess especially true of the ghost stories. And Edith Wharton, in her career was always casting A Backward Glance, which is the name of her memoir. She's always doing that. I mean, The Age of Innocence is a great example, right? Sort of set in the century before she wrote it, right? She's writing it in 1920s, but it's about the 19th century. Or the stories, The Old Maid. I don't know if you've read The Old Maid. It's not a ghost story, but again, she likes to cast that retrospective gaze onto the past, and there's often this sometimes an intermingling and sometimes a confrontation of the present and the past.
Do you think she's a fatalist? Like, what is she trying to tell us with that? Because a lot of these characters, I was just thinking in Age of Innocence, is it Countess Olenka?
Olenska, yeah.
Olenska. You know, she can't escape her past.
Yeah.
Is Edith Wharton telling us we're doomed, or what is she telling us?
I don't know if she's telling us we're doomed. I think it's more that she wants to see the continuity. I mean, I'm thinking about characters, the continuity between the past and the present. I mean, I'm thinking about characters who don't have an attachment to their past. And again, this is more the later work, like her last two complete novels, Hudson River Bracketed and The Gods Arrive, are about the same character, Vance Weston, who's this aspiring writer. And he struggles immensely, especially when he's young, because he has no sense of the past, right? He has no clue. It's not until he's like 18 or 19 that he reads the Romantic poets and he's like, oh my God, revelation. So I think there she's more telling us it's important to have this integration of the present with the past, to have this kind of continuity. But you're right, a lot of her works do have this kind of fatalist strain that maybe you associate with, like, if they're literary scholars watching like the naturalist tradition, you sort of feel like their endings are determined, right? I mean, Lily Bart's maybe an example of that, going back to House of Mirth.
So what about in the ghost stories? What do you think she seems to have been very attracted to this idea of ghost stories, because she came back to it several times and she did it in different ways.